In this video, I'm going to show you the game between reigning world champion Ding Liren, who's playing with the white pieces against Magnus Carlsen. And the Grenke Chess Classic in Germany is a very exciting event so far. So many exciting games have been played, and we also have seen the first game between the two players, which ended in a draw. Really good battle. Magnus was really pushing hard, but also great defense with an exchange sacrifice. Ding Liren managed to save the game. So I've covered a lot of games of the Grenke Chess Classic so far, and I hope you really enjoy it, the coverage so far. And if you do so, please make me a favor, either to subscribe to the channel or watch this video in its entirety, because I'm going to show you what happened now in round 8. Ding Liren is playing with the white pieces, and he starts the game with a move 1 d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3. And here Magnus goes for the very solid move bishop b4, the Bogo Indian defense. After bishop d2, he goes for the most solid continuation to swap the bishops on d2. Queen takes d2, and now the pawn goes to d5. So we have some sort of Queen's Gambit declined, with dark squared bishops being exchanged already. White played here the move e3 so that the bishop covers the pawn on c4. And after castling kingside, now in the majority of the games, white players, they just continue here with the move knight c3. I think a very sensible continuation. But here Ding has a small surprise. He tries to deviate from the main lines and played here the move bishop e2, like a logical developing move, preparing to castle kingside. And I think his idea is that after taking on c4, which was not played by Magnus, his idea is not to take back with the bishop, but instead to play the move knight a3, developing the other minor piece. And imagine you can take with a knight on c4, all white's minor pieces are nicely placed. White can definitely try to play for something there. But Magnus is not going to take. He just kept the tension in the center. Played here the move b6, castling kingside, bishop to b7. And now c takes d5 is played. Well, there are 4 different ways of recapturing. But here Magnus decides to take with a knight. Very logical continuation. I think he's in a way hoping that white is at some point going to play e4, that you will go back with a knight, and then that pawn on e4 is just a target for the black minor pieces. Knight c3 played in the game by Ding. Knight to d7. Black continues developing its pieces as well, and now white decides to take on d5. Well, now there are only 2 options to recapture here. If you do take with the pawn, then the bishop on b7 is quite passive for the rest of the game, and white will seize the initiative on the queen side. It's clear that white is having an edge thanks to the better bishop. Bishop on e2, it's not hindered by its own pawn. So, well, in fact, black decided to take with the bishop instead. So the bishop is still quite active on this diagonal. And in any case, here the move b4 is played. So you're kind of discouraging black from playing the move c5. Now, if you ever gonna play this move c5, I think the main idea for white is to take on c5. And after taking back with a pawn, white now has managed to create an imbalance, advances the pawn to b5. And potentially this is very dangerous, because white is having a 2 versus 1. And I don't think the c-pawn is dangerous at all. So rather than playing this move c5, Magnus played the move a5 here first. I think it's a good move, because by playing this move, you're trying to activate your rook from a8 without moving it. So white can do something about the pawn on b4, but in that case, probably a takes b4 can be played by black, and the rook will be activated along this a file. So white advances the pawn to b5. And now rook c8, the a-file remains closed, so the rook is looking for new opportunities to join play. Rook f c8, and now c5 is played. Very logical move, and well, if you can just move the queen, let's say to e7 or even f6, black has absolutely 0 problems in such a position. when the rooks are connected, so minor pieces have been exchanged. So therefore white decides to capture en passant the pawn on c6. Black takes back, rook takes c6, bishop takes c6, and well, white has an extra pawn in the center. But how are you ever going to mobilize that pawn? Whereas black also is looking for opportunities to advance the queenside majority. That looks pretty annoying in the long run. But okay, for now, it's not a big deal. First, rook c1. So white occupies the open file. The bishop is under threat. And now the move queen a8. It's a nice way of defending your bishop, controlling this diagonal, controlling the light squares, making it even harder for white ever to advance the pawn to e4. But also the rook can of course very soon come to c8, and therefore it's not a problem that the queen is temporarily placed in the corner. It's not doing badly there at all. White played here the move knight e1 with a very simple plan that after rook c8, now Ding is aiming for more exchanges by playing the move bishop f3, neutralizing black's pressure on that diagonal. Bishop takes f3, knight takes f3. More and more pieces are coming off the board. We are getting closer to an endgame, and we know that in endgames these pawns, this queenside majority, it can play a very important role in the outcome of the game. But as we have seen so many times in general in chess, that you can trade off a lot of pieces, but when the strongest pieces, the major pieces, the queens and the rooks, they are still on the board, there is enough scope for creativity with a lot of tactical motives in the position as well. It will be difficult for black to make progress by advancing that pawn majority. Well, first, Magnus played the move h6, so that there will never any sort of back rank issue. And white does the same. White just played the move h3. Very logical move, and I should also mention that something like b5 here cannot be played, because after take-take, the pawn on a5 is just hanging. So black shouldn't do that, and instead Magnus played a more patient, much better move, rook c6, with the idea to simply try to gain control over the c file. So I like this idea, but white goes here for the move queen b2. But now, okay, queen c8, interesting idea, was not played by Magnus. He went for the move b5. So he basically says, okay, the pawn on b5 cannot be taken. There's rook takes c1, as the rook is hanging. And if you do anything else, I'm going to play the move b4. And then black get exactly what he wants. So Ding senses the urgency of the position and swaps the rooks now on c6. Queen takes c6, and once again b4 is on the agenda, and I think black's queen is more active than white. So white comes up with the only move here to try to find a way to generate counterplay with the move queen a3. First of all, you hit the pawn on a5. Therefore a4 is played, pawn is protected now, but here the queen comes into e7 with the idea to give check on e8 when the knight on d7 is pinned. After the king goes away, the pawn on f7 will be hanging. So therefore f6 is played. Of course, that is some sort of a weakening move. You may still consider here queen e8, which was not played by Ding, but I think the following line is quite interesting, so I would like to share it with you. If you go king h7, then d5 is a spectacular idea. Pawn sacrifice. If you do take that pawn, then the knight will come into d4, attacking the queen, and if the knight can come into e6, followed by queen f7, there are all sorts of mating threats. So I think this kind of positional sacrifice to vacate the d4 square for the knight is a very nice active way of playing. However, if you do take with the queen, then knight d4, you hit the pawn on e6, and well, there are various possibilities for black. But if you do play e5, knight e6, knight c5, offering the exchange of knights, then white, just by playing very actively, you can make it very difficult for black to do something. Knight f8 check basically just forces a draw here, because after king g8, knight e6 back, discovered check, king h7, knight f8 is a repetition. Neither side is able to avoid this repetition. So that is one very typical line to illustrate how you can play very actively with the queen and manage to stay in the game. But Ding just goes here for the move knight e1, and you may think, what is this knight doing? Well, Ding has this plan of neutralizing black's majority by setting up a blockade on the b4 square. So let's see how that works. After knight f8, the knight got to stay close to the king. The knight comes into d3. And, well, once again, there are various options. Black played here the move queen c4, attacking both the pawn and the knight. You could also have played queen c2 with this, exactly the same idea. But after queen c4, there's also knight b4. And the knight is now nicely controlling the b4 square. So black is unable to create a passed pawn. The knight even defends the pawn on a2. After queen to c1, well, there is king h2, queen d2. Now the queen is trying to look for counterplay, and it even keeps an eye on this knight on b4, which means that the queen cannot exactly do what it wants. You may just do something about this pawn on f2 by playing, for instance, something like king g3. But Ding plays it active now as well. So it looked kind of strange. He started with knight e1, but all of a sudden the knight has managed to infiltrate now on c6. Both the pawns on f2 and a2 are hanging. Queen takes f2 is probably the best move to open up white's king's position. But there is queen e8 with the idea of getting the knight to e7 with check. There's not much black can do against it. So queen takes pawn was played. Now knight e7 check. The king gotta go away to h7, and now you take that knight on f8. And white is a piece up and threatening checkmate. And the mating threat cannot be parried. However, the queen is really strong. Queen f4 check. And whatever you're gonna do, it's gonna lead to repetition or perpetual. If you go king g1, you can even take the pawn on d4. If you go g3, well, there's at least queen f2, king h1, queen f1. You go back and forth, and it's also a draw. In the game, there followed king to h1, but there is queen f1, king h2, queen f4, king h1, queen f1. And here, the players agreed to a draw. This game, in my opinion, was certainly not as exciting as that first game the two world champions played against each other, but high quality game. Ding tried something new in the opening, but couldn't really make something out of it. It was a very balanced game, high quality chess. That's what you sometimes get to see when the very best players in the world are battling it out against each other. So let me know in the comments what you do think about this game. Ding is not in his best shape since he has become world champion. Magnus is on a roll and very likely to make it to the finals of this Grenke Chess Classic. There are two more games to be played, and then numbers 1 and 2 are going to play a final against each other. Magnus is 1 point ahead, has very good papers to win the event. But okay, there's still a final, so let's see who will become number 2, and let's see who Magnus is going to face in the final. Very exciting games. I'll cover many more exciting games on the channel, so stay tuned and please help the channel grow by subscribing. Thanks for doing that. See you soon. Bye bye.